One day, my beloved parents and brother were suddenly taken from this world in a car accident. As I stood in shock, my brother's wife spoke to me. "The house and all the money are mine. You need to leave soon." Despite my mourning for my brother and parents, my brother's wife only cared about money. I felt anger towards her and decided to take action against her. My name is Mandy Simpson. I am 27 years old. I have been married for 2 years. And I have a kind and dependable husband and a lovely daughter who is 1 year old. I have a brother, Wayne, who is 8 years older than me. He has been married for over 5 years, but they have had no children. I remember him once saying, "It seems that his wife has a condition that makes it difficult to have children." His wife, Amy, was undergoing fertility treatments, but it still seemed difficult. I found Amy a bit difficult to deal with. Amy and Wayne met in college, but after graduating, they reconnected at a reunion where Amy suddenly asked him for advice about her debt. They were not particularly close, but Amy consulted him. Perhaps because Wayne is an exceptionally kind person. He cannot refuse a request for help and always assists those in trouble. Of course, Wayne listened sincerely to Amy's concerns. It turned out she was in debt by about $2,000, which Wayne lent her. Amy was very grateful and thanked him repeatedly. This act of kindness brought Wayne and Amy closer, and they eventually started dating. I didn't find Amy difficult at first. She would say to me, "I'm so happy to have such a cute sister-in-law." And she treated me kindly. I loved my brother. And since he had never dated anyone before, I admired the person he chose as his first partner. I remember feeling happy seeing them smile and laugh together when they decided to get married. Amy then moved in with our parents. They were thrilled because our family has a tradition where the eldest son's wife lives with us to maintain the family home. During festivals like New Year and Thanksgiving, my mother would prepare most of the arrangements and welcome the relatives. Wayne was worried that Amy might find these traditions bothersome, but she accepted them willingly. I was grateful that Amy decided to live in our family home, and after their marriage, she moved in and started learning household matters from my mother. And they seemed happy together. After getting married, Amy took over managing the household finances, including Wayne's savings and salary. My parents still managed their own money, but Amy started managing Wayne's. Wayne worked in a factory after graduating from college, which was dangerous enough that a few people died each year. So his salary was quite good. His skills and sincerity were recognized, and he was promoted to a supervisor in his 20s and to a manager in his 30s. Despite the dangers, he worked hard and earned well. But Amy spent his earnings on gambling and luxury items. The reason Amy had debt in the past was due to gambling. After they started dating, she quit gambling and became frugal with shopping. But after getting married and having freedom with money, she began it again. Wayne didn't blame her, considering the stress of infertility treatments. However, as their savings began to deplete, Wayne told her, "If you continue to spend like this, we may need to reconsider our relationship." Amy then cried and apologized, promising not to do it again. And Wayne forgave her easily. However, Amy started to gamble and shop within her allowance. But when she ran out of money, she began asking me, who had just started working, for loans. I knew Wayne had warned Amy about finances, so I was reluctant. But Amy cried and said, "Just this time." So, I lent her the money. Amy repaid me the next month, and thereafter, she would often come to borrow money. Of course, she always said, "Keep it a secret from Wayne and your mother-in-law, I'll pay you back next month." Knowing that infertility treatments were causing her a lot of stress, I lent her the money without telling Wayne. I also heard that my parents were urging Amy to have children soon, since ours is the main family, and I felt a bit sorry for her. Initially, she borrowed money about once every 6 months. But the frequency increased, and before I got married, she was coming to borrow money every 2 months. Initially, Amy seemed remorseful when borrowing money, but over time, she would just come over, hold out her hand, and if I remained silent, she would raise her voice and demand, "Hurry up and give it to me." You know, right? From Amy's behavior, it didn't seem like she was gambling as much. nor were there new luxury items. I once asked what she was spending the money on, but she yelled, "It's none of your business." That's an invasion of privacy. So, I shrank back and continued to lend her money silently. I gradually started to find Amy difficult to deal with. Even after I got married and moved out, Amy still came to borrow money from me. One day, my husband witnessed Amy's and my interactions several times, and apparently spoke to Wayne about it. This infuriated Amy, and she stormed into my house, shouting, "I told you to keep it a secret. Why did you spill the beans? Wayne and your mother-in-law scolded me a lot." She then slapped me in the face while I was pregnant. Amy's slap was stronger than I expected, and I was taken by surprise, causing me to fall to the floor. My husband could not stay silent and banned Amy from entering our house. After that, Amy stopped coming to our house to borrow money. As my due date approached, my husband's overseas assignment was confirmed. And it was for 3 years. Due to my upcoming delivery, my husband asked his company if someone else could take his place. But he was told that he was the best fit for the project, and it would be difficult for anyone else to replace him. Reluctantly, he prepared to go abroad. Hearing this, my parents suggested that I live with them during my husband's absence. Despite my strained relationship with Amy, considering it was my first childbirth and having my parents close would be helpful, I decided to stay with them. As expected, Amy was not pleased when I returned home. When my parents and brother were not around, Amy approached me and said, "Hey, Ms. Evil Woman. Did you come back here just to flaunt your pregnancy because you know I can't get pregnant? You're such a mean person." From the moment I returned, Amy started addressing me as an evil woman in a derogatory way. "I'm not trying to flaunt anything to you, Amy. You used your husband to stop lending me money. And I never thought you could be so twisted. Are you planning to harass me through Wayne or our parents next? I've never harassed you. And yet, you're bragging about being pregnant right now." "I'm not bragging." "Then you're making me feel miserable without even realizing it, you wicked woman." With that, Amy walked away. I understood her sadness about not being able to conceive, but I did not deserve such harsh words. After all, it's not like the money I didn't know she was spending. Amy had a monthly allowance of $500, which is not a small amount. My pregnancy made me emotionally unstable, and tears streamed down my face. As the rift with Amy deepened, I gave birth to my daughter. Everyone, including my parents and brother, was overjoyed that my first childbirth went safely, except Amy, who looked displeased. Even after being discharged from the hospital, my parents and brother doted on my daughter, buying her toys and clothes every day. My mother was a great help in looking after her, which was very reassuring for a first-time mother like me. Before childbirth, I helped with the household chores, but I was weaker than expected after giving birth, so I couldn't do much. However, being able to focus on childcare while my parents handled the household chores was truly a blessing. Amy did her part in the household chores too. Despite the awkward atmosphere between us, she still did various things for me, so I thanked her. But Amy ignored my words and just walked past. It pained me to see her act like this. But knowing Amy was unable to conceive while my parents and brother were doting on my daughter, I thought she must be hurting more and let it be. Thinking this, I asked my mother not to press Amy too much about getting pregnant. To which my mother replied, "I did mention it a few times in the first year. But after hearing from a friend that too much pressure can make it even harder to conceive due to stress, I haven't said anything since." I had thought Amy was spending money due to pressure from my parents. But according to my mother, that wasn't the case. I became even more curious about what Amy was spending her money on. But since it seemed unlikely she would tell me, I didn't ask. One day, while my parents and brother went shopping, Amy usually would have gone with them, but she had errands and didn't join them. I was changing my daughter's diaper and putting her to sleep. The home phone rang just as my daughter had fallen asleep, and I didn't want to wake her, so I hurried to answer it. "Hello, this is the police. Are you a family member of The Simpsons?" Receiving a call from the police suddenly, I had a bad feeling. "Yes, I'm their daughter." Your parents and brother have been involved in a car accident and have been taken to the hospital. Could you come to the hospital immediately? Hearing those words, I felt all the blood drain from my body. An accident involving my parents and brother. That they were taken to the hospital meant the injuries weren't minor. Barely holding myself from collapsing, I took my daughter and rushed to the hospital. As soon as I arrived, I fell to my knees. The doctor informed me that my parents and brother had passed away. I couldn't accept the reality that my beloved parents and brother were gone. It was too sudden, I couldn't even cry, just stood there in shock. The only sound in the hospital was my daughter's crying. An hour after I arrived at the hospital, Amy showed up. I had tried calling her multiple times while on the way. But she didn't answer, so I emailed her, and she finally made it. I weakly told her about our parents and brother, and Amy just asked, "Is it true?" When I nodded, she said nothing more. We went home together to discuss what to do next. But I was in such shock that I was speechless. As soon as we got home, Amy blurted out, "Most of this house and money are in Wayne's name, right? Then, it all belongs to me, his wife. You better take your ugly daughter and leave quickly." I was grieving the deaths of my brother and parents, but Amy wasn't. She showed no signs of sadness, she was even smiling. I couldn't believe Amy's attitude or her words. Indeed, after Amy and Wayne got married, my parents had transferred all ownership to Wayne to establish him as the successor. However, I felt it wasn't the time to talk about money or inheritance. And anger welled up inside me at Amy's remarks. "Amy, aren't you sad about my brother's death? Talking about someone who's dead won't bring them back to life. It's pointless. Anyway, you better pack up and leave this house right now. From today, I am the head of this house, so do as I say. Oh, but arranging a funeral is such a hassle. So if you'll handle that, you can stay until it's over. That being said, I'm heading out now, so take care of everything else." "Where are you going?" "I was having fun with my friends until I was called back because of you guys. I'm going back out to enjoy myself now. There's no one to nag me about money anymore, so I can do whatever I want. Anyway, take care of the rest." With that, Amy left the house. Her attitude made my blood boil. How could she act like this when her husband had died? I even doubted whether she had ever truly cared for my brother. Moreover, it was unbelievable that she was only thinking about the inheritance. Amy showed no intention of preparing for my parents' or brother's funerals. It was frustrating to think that someone so devoid of duty or decency might take all of my brother's inheritance. I suspected that Amy, eager for money, would quickly sell the house. Nonetheless, burdened with my daughter and overwhelmed with grief, I proceeded to prepare for the funeral alone. Amy did not return home that day. I was utterly dismayed that she could go out and enjoy herself on the day her husband and in-laws died. After finishing most of the funeral arrangements, I went to check on my daughter and noticed that my brother's room door was open. I entered and saw many family photos and pictures with friends from his youth on the walls. Curiously, there were no photos of Amy displayed. Amy and my brother usually slept in a different room. And this room was mainly used by my brother for studying or managing important documents. So perhaps that's why there were no photos of her. Now, with no way to ask my brother, tears welled up in me as the reality of our loss sunk in. Suddenly, I noticed an album on my brother's bookshelf. As I pulled it out, a large brown envelope also came with it and fell to the floor. Curious about its contents, I looked inside and was shocked. This could prevent Amy from taking everything in the house. I carefully held on to the documents my brother had left behind and returned to my room. Amy returned home the next afternoon in a good mood, apparently having drunk quite a bit. While I was incredulous, I informed her about the wake that evening and proceeded to the venue to continue with the preparations. Throughout the wake, Amy sat composed without showing any signs of sorrow. The relatives were shocked by her demeanor, but she seemed unconcerned, likely thinking about what she could do with my brother's inheritance. Tears flowed continuously from me during the ceremony. I never imagined I would be separated from my parents so soon. After the wake, Amy approached me triumphantly. "As promised, after tomorrow's funeral, you'll leave the house. No, I won't. What? What are you talking about? I am the head of that house now. Well, you might have kept it a secret, but I know. Weren't you and my brother in the middle of divorce proceedings? How do you know that? But even if we were in the middle of proceedings, the divorce hasn't been finalized. So legally, I'm still Wayne's wife. That means I can still inherit from Wayne. We'll see about that. I handed Amy the brown envelope. She frowned as she took it, and upon seeing the contents, her face turned pale. You knew about this? Is this a joke? It seems my brother hired a detective to gather all this evidence of your infidelity. He had such evidence. It appeared Amy had been unfaithful since shortly after their marriage. Also, because of the risky nature of his job, it seems my brother had prepared a will. I handed Amy the will written by my brother. It stated, "In the event of my death, all my inheritance shall go to my parents or my sister Mandy. None shall go to my wife Amy. This is invalid. Even if this is somehow valid, I am still legally Wayne's wife. I should still get some of the inheritance. I wonder about that. I've consulted someone I know. And they said that if the marriage became untenable due to infidelity, even if before the divorce, the part of the will stating none shall go to my wife Amy is valid." Amy listened to my words, then tore up the will in frustration. "This destroys the evidence. I'll do the same with these photos." Amy tore up the photos of her infidelity that were in the brown envelope. I smiled defiantly at her actions. "Amy, did you really think I'd hand over all the original documents so easily?" "Of course. The original will and the data from the photos have already been submitted to my lawyer." Hearing this, Amy collapsed weakly on the spot. Later, realizing she wouldn't get any inheritance, she filed for divorce and left the house. However, convinced she would receive the inheritance. She had spent wildly with her lover in a luxury hotel suite until the morning of the day my brother and his parents died, and all those bills went straight to Amy. Naturally, she couldn't pay and ended up in debt. To make matters worse, her lover broke up with her, unwilling to stay with a woman in debt. Abandoned by her lover, Amy had to work exhaustively to repay her debts. Eventually, I decided to leave the care of our parents' home to relatives from a branch family. As for me, my husband came to pick me up after hearing about my parents. And now I am living happily abroad, watching my daughter grow.